Alrighty, welcome back, everybody. AJC and the Web Devs with returning guest Ishan Anand, my old boss and good buddy.
Hi, am I your first returning guest or not? Out of curiosity.
Nah.
Okay.
Nikki T was a returning guest. I had Monarch was like doing a weekly thing with me for a while. So
Oh, awesome.
you're
Okay.
you're one of the first though.
One of the first. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
if not the first, at least that's the second best. Yeah, thank you for having me. So for folks who don't know me, I'm Ishan Nand. I was the CTO and co-founder at Layer Zero, which became part of Edgio in 2021. And more recently, I've been doing a lot with AI. I'm probably best known as an AI consultant and educator. I built a implementation of GPT-2 entirely in spreadsheets. It's called Spreadsheets Are All You Need. You can go to the website, spreadsheetsareallyouneed.ai. And I also teach a course based on it where I take folks through every step and every formula of that spreadsheet so they understand how a transformer works on the inside. And most recently, I think we'll get into it, I re-implemented it entirely in JavaScript for web developers. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I'm excited for the JS thing. We actually talked about this last time you were on. I was like, you could just do this in like React, and you were like, I've thought about that. But
Yeah.
is it vanilla JS? Is it web components? What is it written in?
Yeah, so it's entirely in web components. And the reason I did that is I wanted to be as accessible as possible for the largest audience. And, then if I made it React, people have to learn React. And the basic
Now they
interactive
have to learn
primitives
web
are
components.
well, web components are fairly simple in terms of their life cycle. And I wanted it
Allegedly.
to be structured in such a way that it was actually easy and flexible to run and develop and drop in. So, for example, you could stick this inside any CMS using these same components. You could put parts of the transformer model. I'm actually embedding it inside WordPress. I didn't want to have all the headaches of if I come back to it, a couple weeks later, a couple months later, even years later, you currently have to worry like, do I have to redo a whole build step and stuff like that, and things going out of date. I wanted something that would be very, long-term stable, and I want something that would be like easy to use in almost any environment. When I was so I got to teach a machine learning class, or 2 weeks out of a machine learning class, where a professor invited me to come speak as a guest speaker for 2 weeks and teach them on LLMs. And that's actually interesting because like normally LLMs are like at the very end of the class, the advanced concept. And one of my things is saying you don't need to do that. It's actually a lot more approachable than folks realize. But inside a learning environment, it was very interesting to see like all the restrictions. You had people on different types of machines, limits on what they can install. And so I wanted this to be as easy as possible to run locally. So you could be in an air-gapped environment. You just bring the HTML file and it should run. In fact, you don't even need a server. Like I wrote it so that I can double click on it and then it just runs.
So
And so that's been a breath of fresh air. Yeah.
do you have or have you thought about doing like a stack blitz or something like that for it?
I have thought about that. I think, as you remember when we were at Layer Zero, we were following what they were doing and thought extremely highly of what they're doing, and it's very cool. I have thought about using that. I've thought about using WASM in various other parts, but I don't know where you want to start. But that's we might be going way down a rabbit hole. Maybe we should start at a higher level. But you tell me, where do you want to go first?
Let's talk some topical stuff first. Just kind of ease us in, and then we can get deep into the tech. I know you have lots of thoughts about DeepSeek, and we were just talking, before we started, how for some reason the normies know about DeepSeek. Why do you think that is?
The first sign for me, well, for those who aren't aware, like DeepSeek was, in the AI community has been aware of DeepSeek for a long time. All of last year, we were talking about, various DeepSeek releases. One of the, the podcasts I routinely listen to and sometimes occasionally drop in is Thursday AI, and they had talked about DeepSeek multiple times, whether it was for V3. I remember when R1 preview was announced last year, and I was like, wow, they already caught up to O1, but it wasn't the full paper. It wasn't the full open source release. So they didn't come out of nowhere. But to me, the tide had turned when my son, who's in elementary school, said to me, and this was the Sunday before the market reaction, and DeepSeek had already been out for a week, and he's like, Dad, do you know what DeepSeek is? I was like, oh my gosh, my elementary, like he's never done that for anything other than ChatGPT. Like, Claude is an amazing model as well, and not enough people know about it. And I have to tell them about it. And so
they don't know about Gemini. They don't know about anything. It's always just been ChatGPT. But now, for some reason, this is like the second one everyone heard about. Like my doctor asked me about DeepSeek. Like, what?
And it's not even. I mean, there's even among Chinese models. There's also been Quen. Don't get me wrong, they've been doing amazing work. But for whatever reason, they seem to have broken through. And so one of the interesting things I started digging through is the implications of that. Let me pull up some data that I tweeted out. Let me find that.
So real quick, I'll tell you my theory. Okay. I think that one of the reasons why it blew up is because it's a Rorschach test for anyone's opinion about either AI or geopolitical China stuff. Because people could look at it as a thing where, oh, China is now ahead in AI, or, oh, China just stole this, or, oh, China lied about how much it cost, or China didn't lie about how much it cost. So you have all these different perspectives that anyone can bring to it. And then also it's like, is same thing about OpenAI, because everyone has opinions about OpenAI, whether they're going to be like taken over or not. So I feel like everyone kind of came to it with their own perspective. And so everyone was talking about it because everyone wanted to push their own opinion about what it meant.
In fact, I was going to use that same phrase. It's a Rorschach test for, awesome. Whatever your preconceived priors are. There are investors who might have felt certain companies were overvalued or skittish about the CapEx spend. There are people talking about the geopolitical concerns. There are AI researchers who are genuinely excited about some of the techniques, and we can get into that were in this open source release that were really, really fascinating. And there are plenty of people who I wrote about this in my AI 2025 trends. One of the trends I wrote about is this growing AI backlash. And I wrote that I feel like there's a segment of the public that feels like AI is a thing happening to them and not something they can be part of. And that's actually one of the motivations for why do spreadsheets are all you need, is to help people understand you don't need a whole PhD to understand how this thing works or to be part of the revolution. And so there are plenty of people. There's a guy who did an interesting survey. He went through a bunch of, I think, interviews of why people were talking about DeepSeek. And a lot of them were doing it to stick it to the man, whoever they thought the man was. And so it was very much, it became, ammunition in I guess, a variety of different arguments. But for whatever reason, that whole, it was also timed the same time as the inauguration. I don't know if that was a coincidence. I mean, it's also, maybe they're rushing to get this done before Chinese New Year. But it just, it hit a certain je ne sais quoi that just kind of snowballed on itself. And like you said, it here, let me pull this up. It was one of the first that catapulted. So this was some data I started posting. Here's Google Trends for various AI models. So here's DeepSeek, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. So this red one is ChatGPT. And this spike right here, by the way, is, I'm pretty sure, the Santa voice release during the 12 days of shipments. And I actually noted here, yeah, it's a very instructive. What?
I don't know what that is.
You could call Santa and talk to him. So imagine you told your kid, hey, you want to talk to Santa? He can now talk. He or she can now talk to Santa and be like, I want this for Christmas. And it would be like, ho, ho, ho. Or it's like, Santa, what does Rudolph like to eat? And he'd be like, hey, or something like that. Right.
That's funny. Somehow I missed that.
Yeah. So it's a instructive lesson, I think, for those of us in the technology bubble or even the AI bubble, on how to make AI even relevant to the outside of the bubble, to most people in the general public. And even as well known as OpenAI is in ChatGPT. And I think for most people, ChatGPT and OpenAI is AI. When they think about AI, they're not thinking about the recommendation algorithms inside their social network. They're not their AI is a chat interface, and it's hosted by OpenAI, and ChatGPT is what it's called, right?
Yeah, it's there's a whole South Park episode about it,
Oh, is there really? Okay, yes. Then that just That's the final seal.
It's hilarious. It's about how Wendy is mad at Stan because he always just thumbs up her texts, and then Clyde is sending these like long, amazing messages to his girlfriend, and Stan's like, "Clyde, how are you doing it?" And he's like, "ChatGPT, bro."
Oh boy, that reminds me of the. Have you seen the Krazam AI boyfriend video?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
my
you
God,
should
I
look that
love
one.
Krazam. I need to check that out.
Okay. Well, I'll briefly describe it. It's basically like some decades into the future, and this girl is bringing home her AI boyfriend, and they're gonna get married, and it's kind of like an
Oh no, I did
family.
see this.
Yeah,
Wow, this is back in 2023. Yeah, no, I
yeah.
did
This
see
was a
that.
while. Yeah. At first, we
Yes,
thought
I
it
remember this. Because
was
he's
a joke.
racist towards the AI boyfriend.
Exactly.
Is
Yeah.
the joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to this. So, like this shows like even as well known as the first lesson or side lesson is like even as well known as OpenAI and ChatGPT are, right? There's room to grow in like awareness, right? Look at this. This is pretty huge. Like they really hit the the target on this one. But the more important thing that I'm trying to get to is if you look at Claude and Gemini, which are both really good models. Gemini, especially if you're trying to do a lot of data with video. Claude has an interesting personality. It's one of the few models I hear people talk about the way they talk about Apple products, just in terms of its personality. But DeepSeek is the first one that just look at this. Is the only one that managed to jump up, even though there are plenty of worthwhile contenders. I don't know if this is going to come back up. I will tell you when I searched as a topic, but it looks different than when I search as a search term, which is not unusual. But when I searched as a topic the first few days, it didn't really pick up anything. So I think they were caught off guard, and we'll see how this turns out a little bit later. But the second order side effect of this is, yeah, a lot of people downloaded the DeepSeek app. Like another example of this is you see it at the top of the charts, but I think it also has second order effects. So I think more people now are aware of running models locally as a distribution channel for AI models. And that's going to be more popular potentially in the future than it was before. And DeepSeek may have helped give that a further boost. So here's an example of that. This is Olama, which is, for those who don't know, a tool for running models locally. And you can see right here, this is the 90 days preceding R1. And then all of a sudden it takes this huge, massive spike, right? Olama search interest surges. If you go back to this one, you can see
you can look at the most popular models on Olama. So before it was Llama 3.3, which says it has 1.2 million polls. Now it's DeepSeek R1 with 13 million.
I think
that's not entirely right. This is not perfectly ranked. Actually, I'm scrolling down, and it had Llama 3.1 had 22 million because that one had been around longer.
But this is over the same time period or different time periods?
Here, just go to olama.com/search.
olama.com/search.
Okay, we got Scott in the chat.
Okay. So here's popular, but it doesn't say over what time period. But
I think that's polls like total.
Yeah, I think it's overall time, right? And Llama's been around a long time. So
but the fact that it's only been out for a couple, like a month or two, because I'm assuming that's different from R1 preview.
R1 preview was before, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They, somebody I think tweeted out there like there aren't enough NVIDIA GPUs to run all the downloads of R1 that have happened. But which is also an indication of maybe how the market mispriced things. But here's a few other things like GGUF, llama.cpp, safe tensors. And you can just see all of them bounce around, and then right around when R1 hits, they all take so I have to imagine I wrote like the customer journey is like DeepSeek, they hear about it, they're like, okay, I download Olama, then what the heck is GGUF, right? Or safe tensors.
What is GGUF?
It's a format for downloading model weights that you would use in one of these tools. And safe tensors as well. Same thing. So I think it's possible that there's the second order effects from this, I don't know, I will call it like a DeepSeek moment, that are really interesting. Both,
Yeah, I saw some people calling it AI Sputnik moment, which I think is a fairly good comparison.
A little bit. It's not bad. It certainly captures I think, a certain segment that, like you said, the Rorschach test of like how people react. But the difference with Sputnik is that the US realized it was behind. Here it was like them catching up. Maybe that's a subtle difference, but it
Yeah, I
definitely
think
was a
people
wake
are
up call.
people are making the argument that because it was so cheap that this means they're now ahead of us. I don't really buy that argument though, because even if we do take the number at face value, like this is how things go because a big, scientists come up with a new breakthrough and it costs a ton of money to research it and create it, and then people can replicate it for cheaper. Like that's just how things go. It's like it's not really a breakthrough in terms of going beyond O1. It kind of is it reaches a similar level to O1 for much cheaper, but people are acting like this is like some huge deal that they did something amazing. It's like, well, no, because they didn't make the breakthrough.
Well, to be fair, I'll give you my take on it. They made like a couple of really interesting breakthroughs that made things better or more efficient. The way they trained R1 was interesting. Sorry, R10, and I did a video on that. And we can talk more about why R10 is interesting. They did some interesting efficiencies like multi-token prediction, latent attention. These are all things you do. Well, not multi-token prediction, but latent attention are things you do, to make it more efficient. But I think the bigger thing is I think we have to put the number in context. This is an apples to oranges comparison. So let's pull up this. This is the thing that I think got everyone spooked is this phrase here. And they said it cost us something like 5.5. Yeah, 5.5 million. I don't know why because I zoomed in. So it's not, I have to zoom in properly for it to handle it like this. But right here, this 5 point still doesn't want to highlight, but you see it, 5.5 million.
Yeah, we see. So
that is,
do you think that is an actual accurate comparison to what it would have cost? Because I've heard other people say that that's leaving out things like actually buying the data center, which other models were including in their price. But then I hear people say that it is the same thing. So I've heard various claims about whether that's an actual accurate number and an accurate comparison. I don't know who to believe.
It isn't. So if all you care about is how much it costs them to do that last final training run, the estimates, if you take the flop count, I'm actually working on a video on this. The flop count is roughly in the right ballpark. However, the cost of building a model is more than just that one last training run. And they even say it here in the paper.
That's why I think it's deceptive to say that it only costs that.
Well, I think they may or may not have intended, I think somewhere along the line, somebody read this who didn't appreciate what it takes to train a model and saw 5.5 million. I mean, I literally saw an article I wrote to the author where it's like they spent 5 million compared to the 5 billion that OpenAI spent on development. And that's
and that was the headline. That's what everyone was talking about. And
it's my analogy is it's like taking a house in, I don't know, someplace that's, let's say Texas, where the costs are cheaper, and pricing a house based on just the lumber, and then looking at a house in, let's say, California and comparing the whole house to the cost. Like it's pricing a house just based on the timber. Yes, this is part of the.
So you're definitely falling on the line of it's deceptive to frame it as this is the only thing they spent to create this model.
It's deceptive to frame, or it's misleading to frame it. Yeah. It is not, I would say.
I don't think the paper did that. Like,
yes, I want to be really clear.
I don't think the researchers necessarily tried to do that. Yes. I think that the news cycle ran away with it, like we were talking about the Rorschach test.
Yeah. I want to be really clear. I think the paper was not trying to be deceptive. I think it is deceptive to frame it or misleading to frame it that way.
Scott's got a good point here, though. The actual cost of per token is quite a bit cheaper.
So there's probably margin. There's probably, and that I can't speak to. It is definitely true that it's cheaper. In fact, but there are commercial models. I think Gemini, last I checked, actually has a version that's on par with DeepSeek's pricing. So
also, if you want to, like, there's like Grok and Together and Firework, which let you run like Llama 3.3, and those are cheap as hell too.
Those are.
But my whole issue is that the outputs are not really that great with Llama compared to the best models, whereas DeepSeek, the outputs are actually pretty good.
Look, they've built a nice, efficient model. And definitely, I think it's something various audiences need to pay attention to. Like the AI community, there's some really exciting developments. Those who are concerned about policy need to reevaluate their priors. So I don't want to undersell it, but I think actually Dario Amodei, I don't know if you've seen his post. Did you see his post on DeepSeek? He basically said, like, DeepSeek did build a model more efficiently, but not to the ratios that people think it was. Like, another key thing is, like, people look at how much OpenAI or these other guys spend, and there's like 100, like the number of people on this paper, like authors, is really, really large. Sorry, that's on the R1
you're
page.
You're talking about this post, I'm assuming.
Yes, yeah. And he makes a really other good point, which is we're comparing this model to models that were trained or built, 6 to 12 months ago. And the cost of building a model like has a Moore's law like curve. And so it's not surprising. He walks through the rough high level math of this, that it's not surprising where they landed. Yes, it is more efficient than we might have expected, but it's not it's not 5 million versus 5 billion, right? That's like, this doesn't count the people, it doesn't count the experiments. It even says here, excluding costs associated with prior research, ablation experiments on architectures, algorithms, and data. One thing that has to be remembered is that the field is very empirical. When you're adjusting the hyperparameters of a model,
what I love about it.
you don't know if this is really going to improve things or not. Like, a good example is it took years for people to realize, oh, we're going to put the layer norm, here instead of over here, and that improves training time. That was a space of years, and people have to do experiments like that. Oh, if we tried, like, even multi-latent attention, is this really going to work? What you do is you try it in a smaller model, and you're like, oh, this seems to work. Try it in a slightly bigger model, and then you get a sense of scaling law for any particular modification you're making. And do we think this is going to hold up, or is this tapping out and it doesn't really improve at scale? There's a lot of work and research that goes into that. There's a bunch of safety, and then a lot of other things to put things out. This is just literally to get one run. It's the final run that you do to train the model, but it ignores everything else. It's like judging a house by just the timber cost. Yeah. Like, there's so many other things that go into it.
Yeah, I know we're fairly short on time, so unless you have any other big things you want to say on DeepSeek, we should transition into your JS thing.
Yeah, so I'll just say one other thing. I do have a video on R10, which I think is the most fascinating to me intellectually about the model. And that's where they built a reasoning model that you didn't have to do the common RLHF pipeline for it. It kind of just using reinforcement learning with a really strong base model, it suddenly learned to think on its own, which is both really interesting and exciting, but also potentially scary. Where do
I find this video?
This video, it's on YouTube. I will. It's on my channel.
What's your YouTube channel? I can't. Oh, here
it's called Spreadsheets Are All You Need, but I'll drop it in our chat. So in that video, I walked through, what they call a post-training pipeline looks like. And basically R10 skipped a lot of those steps. To be clear, R1 did not. R1 still had a complex, semi-complex pipeline. But the implication here that's really important is that building reasoning models has gone a heck of a lot easier for open source developers. And there's a bunch of experimentation. I walked through this gentleman, Will Brown. I think he's at Morgan Stanley. He had a really simple example of building a reasoning model out of a very simple model. And you can just go and run that, on RunPod, and you can see the aha moment where the model gets smarter yourself. So that's the last thing I'll leave, but check out that video and you can see more of that.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely. I just subscribed to your channel.
Okay. Yeah. So then let's talk about the JavaScript implementation.
First off, is there a repo for this?
There is no repo. You can just go to GitHub, not GitHub. You go to spreadsheets are all you need.ai/GPT2. There will be a repo. I just haven't finished getting around to it, but this is where you can see it. And let me do the following. Let me set the stage here. So first, to understand where this is coming from is I built this Excel spreadsheet, which you can download from GitHub. So if you go to GitHub,
this is what our last episode was about. We'll
exactly.
Check that out.
So it's the spreadsheet. You can download either this one. If you're on an older version of Excel, get version 7, 0.7. If you're on a newer version of Excel, get 0.6 because the formulas are a little cleaner. But basically, you type in some prompt in here, and then you hit run and go here to calculation options. I'm on manual. If you hit calculate the entire thing, it will eventually spit out the same next predicted token as GPT-2, on Hugging Face transformers run at temperature 0. They'll give you the identical outputs. This thing can only handle about like 10 tokens. It's an Excel spreadsheet, but it implements the entire thing inside pure spreadsheet functions. And one of the things I learned is that, a lot of people don't have the latest version of Excel. This can be really slow. And I was very limited in the kinds of things that I could do and illustrate. So one example of that is I wanted to, as part of this thing I'm working on, I want to count the number of flops that occur during a calculation. And you can actually derive it from the parameters, but I want to just be able to calculate it empirically. So what I did is I built this weird kind of framework that's like a mix of a Python notebook and a spreadsheet that live in a browser. And there's really two sets of web components here.
First off, I was supposed to say this is really fascinating that you've created like a JavaScript Python notebook essentially.
I want something that was going to run everywhere. So what you have is two sets of components. So everything's a cell, and it's called sane, or spreadsheets are all you need cell. And there's two types of cells. There's cells that are code, so that's these ones, and then there's cells that are sheets or tables. And so what you see here is, first thing I need to do is,
you gotta get this in a repo. I want to be able to just like clone this down. This is a little ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. Let me pull up this though. First thing you have to do, there's a link if you're going to try this out to download all the model parameters. So this is GPT model parameters as a collection of CSV files. There's 150 of them. So what you have to do the first time you come through is you get those, you download it, you unzip the file, and then you load it in here. It takes a little bit of time, maybe less than 30 seconds, and it loads all 150 files. And then they're sitting in your index.db database. So if you reload the page, you're good. And then at this point, you've got the entire model. Every part of the model is here. No abstractions to get in the way. So it's not turtles all the way down. The turtles stop at some point, and they stop at vanilla JavaScript. That's, so here's the matrix multiply. Right here is matrix multiply. Yeah, let me blow up the font. Let's do that. There you go.
There we go.
That might be too much.
Cool.
Yeah. So here's the code for matrix adding. Here's the code for matrix multiply. So, one of the things I'm working on right now in the video is you want to count the number of flops. You can just do window.flopCount ++ and just do that. There's basically like 10 places. And then you can hit run and you've redefined the entire, that function. So you can make modifications to this code. And so that's the base code. And then everything builds on that. So you've got, here's separate into words. And let's see, here's a sheet. So this runs one of your JavaScript functions that you've defined. And then it will show the result in a spreadsheet-like table. And this will run everything up into that sheet. So let's see. Here it is. So we have the prompt, Mike is quick, he moves. It gets separated into these words. If I keep going down, let's see. It's going to pull, we'll get our prompt to tokens. And then our final list of tokens is here. So let me run this all the way here. This will take a little, there it is. Mike is quick, he moves. These are the token IDs.
Pretty snappy.
Right. Yeah, this is snappy. If you want to run the whole thing, it'll take about a minute or 2 minutes. So, here we can just set it to go, and then you can see the whole thing running.
By the way, does it feel good coding in a programming language again instead of Excel?
It does. I have to say, it really does feel good to be in a real programming language. So what this allows you to do is basically, if you're a JavaScript or web developer, you can go and you can see how this works, and in as much detail as you want. I like to think of it, there's two levels of detail to understand the model. The first is you can look at these sheet cells and just see the function. You can say, oh, matrix multiply or layer norm. I don't need to know what that does, but I can see this is the steps that are happening. And actually, if I unclick this and you could look inside. So the way I'm referencing things, for example, I've created this little weird pseudo notation. So block step 4 is up here. So every table can reference a previous other table by putting these brackets. And that fixes one of the problems I had inside the spreadsheet where I had weird formulas that needed to address, I have these offset. And this is really a much simpler formula than you'll realize. But it's hard to see that when you've got this like offset, which is how I define a matrix of a certain size and dimension. And then I have to go pull from a particular, tab that has the weight matrices. And it just got really hard to read. And it really made it harder to understand what the model is doing. But here I can just say, okay, you do a matrix add and a matrix multiply of step 3 and whatever steps come after that. And so that it was my other goal, was to make this, so you could eventually at some point write to the formulas and then you'll see what's happening. Let's see. I think it's on, let's see where it is. Let's see, where are you? If I tab away, the browser optimization will turn off the JavaScript. I think it's in the iterate blocks. Yeah, that's where it is. So now it's coming through. It's basically going through the entire process. And the key other thing that makes this work is you get a sense for how much this is a fully deterministic process. Like a regular program like Microsoft Word is a bunch of control flow statements. Like if the user does this, then do that. There are very little if-thens in here. I know exactly what the calculation is going to do. I know a fixed amount of compute that's going to take place in the entire process. And then let's see, we're going to get our final token out here. There's our logits. There's a predicted token. There's quickly again. So run the whole thing. You can see everything that's happening inside the model. And my goal is to take my class. So I teach a class, I'll bring it up here, on Maven, where I basically walk through this entire Excel sheet and I show you how every step of the model works. I give you all the background you need without all the formulas. You really just need to have some recollection of what calculus is. I don't bother computing like the partial derivatives or the gradients. I do that for you in one example where I show how backpropagation works, but there's no questions or tests on, go ahead and calculate the derivatives. PyTorch and similar tools do that for you. But give you a very strong intuition for how the model works and what each component in the model is trying to do. And I'm moving to making more of that class work with this tool, specifically so web developers can take their JavaScript knowledge and understand how a model works. I think there's I know if you go into any of the forums, I sometimes hang out on like the Reddit Learn Machine Learning, and people are like, well, how do I get into machine learning? And I want to, what do I have to do? And people are like, well, you got to take 6 months of this math class, 6 months of another math class, and all this other stuff. And then you take this basic machine learning class, which is going to do logistic regression and all these other things, which are good, k nearest neighbors. These are really
like that.
What? Yeah, they're really good. Yeah, they're really good techniques to know if you want to learn all of machine learning. But I suspect most people are getting into it because of the ChatGPT moment. And they want to know as efficiently as possible, like, how the heck does this thing work? And that's my goal. And so basically in 5 lessons, hour and a half each one, we walk through every single part of the model, even if you've got no machine learning background. I don't think, this idea that LLMs are, let's put that at the very end of the class, which makes sense if you're trying to build up, somebody.
The whole deal. The whole
yeah,
point.
well, it makes sense if you're trying to be a machine learning engineer and machine learning research, because there are a lot of problems where maybe you shouldn't use a LLM to solve it. But I think a lot of the interest right now is driven by that. And if you just need to know, because your boss or somebody else is saying we need an AI strategy, they're probably talking about a ChatGPT or large language model strategy. And if you want to understand how they work, like concretely, what are all those settings in the Olama UI? What is top P? What is top K? Or you hear about some research like DeepSeek. What were the innovations there? What did we know and what did we not? This course is really designed to get you to the point where you can even read parts of a paper and get the gist of it, even if you don't have the mathematical background. So
the
that's
one big thing
that's
that
why I built this.
I find is still missing is that what you're working with is you already have the pre-trained like parameters already, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
are you ever
Correct.
going to do something where you will actually like train a model from scratch?
It's funny you say that. I am working on that.
All right, cool. Talk about that.
Um, I would need to build a auto gradient system in order to do that. But that is
What is that?
one of the reasons why I did this in. So I have and this is one of the spreadsheets I use. Let's see where that is.
And also, how many go rounds have you done of this class so far?
I'm probably on my 4th or 5th cohort. Right now, the last cohort was in January. And what I've done is I've left the cohort open for anybody to join and watch the recordings. So I had a bunch of people. Almost every cohort, I had like a couple people who would just join asynchronously. They wouldn't show up for the lectures, and I had plenty of people like I really want to take this, but the time does not work for me, and I don't think I can do 90 minutes during the day. So I said, well, look, you can always watch the recording, and I'm happy to answer questions. So now what I've done is I've left it open, and you get access to the recordings. You can connect with folks in the same Discord community. You get all the quizzes, and then you have the option to attend a future live cohort for free. So in the future, if you ever want that live experience. So that's the answer to that question. But I am working on doing an automatic differentiation. I might use an existing framework. I found one in JavaScript that I'm testing right now, and that will give me a head start. I do have a version. It's called JS PyTorch, actually. And I started looking at it, and it looks like their transformer block is slightly different from the way GPT-2 does, but all the other components they have, their linear and the other ones, are probably close enough. I've gotten through, I think, maybe my first part of a block or layer, and so far it seems to match up. Let me see. I'm not looking at the. Yes, that is it. So I can use that probably, and that's something I'm actually actively looking at. I can show you this though, which is why I need to go to that. So this is a neural network that's a very simple neural network trained with inside a spreadsheet. This is literally training it to learn. So you've got this parabola, and you're trying to get this network to learn it. And each one of these are an epoch. So here's one epoch, and then here's a second epoch. And you can actually see
epoch, right?
Epoch. Sorry, I said epoch. Yeah. Epoch. And you can see the overall loss is going down. And so you can actually train this by just doing, spreadsheet copy and paste. So if I go here, copy this, and then I paste.
This is the old school. This is back propagation. This is like from the 80s.
Well, yeah, this is the old. And so you can see this is where I calculate the partial derivatives out for the class, and then we use those to actually adjust the learning rate.
This would have been so useful for me when I was first trying to learn AI back in like 2016. And I just had no idea what the hell anything was. So I was like reading about things like back propagation, gradient descent. I was reading these like highly technical, complex descriptions of it. This would have been super useful.
Oh, well, that's very validating. But the key point is just for this simple 2-node network, you can see how complex it gets in a spreadsheet to do it. So once I built the entire thing and I was like, I really want to train a model, I was like, it was another reason why I moved to JavaScript. I can't train because I want to do things like, what's the difference between DPO and GRPO? GRPO is one of the other innovations that DeepSeek did. So it's hard to do that when you're in a spreadsheet. At that point, the spreadsheet's getting less useful, and it's time to go back to a programming language.
Yeah,
so that's why
yeah,
exactly. So stay tuned for that, because I'm very excited to actually have you be able to fine tune a model. I think it will take too long to train a GPT-2 class model on a single machine. But what I could do in the demo I'm trying to do is you start with the existing weights of GPT-2, and then you change what you want the outcome for a prompt to be, and you can just go ahead and call it so forth, fine tune. JS PyTorch actually has a demo of training a model to identify the NIST data set. That's a very tangible, like, visual example. You can see it getting better and better. I would present it slightly differently, but he's already done, some example work there, and he's already got an optimizer in there. So I'm very excited to be going down that path. And then once I can do that, I can show a lot more AI techniques. My whole goal is this, I call it radical idea, that we can take simple tools to make the concepts underlying these amazing programs more accessible, because they're not, I think, as complex as you might be unintentionally misled to believe. Like it's very easy to look at the news headlines and be like, this is arcane magic. And I think that's misleading, and it's also dangerous, because when it feels like magic, you can have irrational reactions. Although there are plenty of rational reasons to be concerned about AI. What I don't want is the irrational ones. Like,
well, also when it's magic, you have to defer to the magicians, which is disempowering.
It's a interesting way to phrase it. I like that phrasing. And I want people to feel like, oh wow, this is interesting. I mean, when R1 came out, there are plenty of people in the AI community who are like, oh, let me go try this. Like I mentioned, Will Brown. It's like, wow, this works. This is really interesting. I want more people to feel that, oh wow, I can try this. And that doesn't necessarily mean like there's probably a lot of reason to use a hosted model, to be honest, in terms of total cost of ownership and stuff like that. But at least you don't feel as disempowered when you understand what's happening under the hood.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the models. How far do you think you can go with just GPT-2? And do you feel like you're going to want to eventually get to the point where you're creating your own transformer, or that you're going to want to bring in a more modern model? Because it seems like everything you're doing is kind of built around GPT-2 and has been from the beginning.
That's true in the past, but I don't want that to be true going forward. So this is the much more speculative area that I'm working on, which is, I think this idea of a Python notebook-like environment that is web native and can go anywhere is actually really, really powerful as a prompt optimization and engineering tool. I think there is going to be a future application that is, call it a spreadsheet on steroids, or call it a spreadsheet mixed with AI, mixed with a Python notebook, that's going to help or be the workbench for users to evaluate data coming from models, adjust the data coming back from models, or engineer prompts around models. And so I very much want this to eventually be a tool that, some of these functions you're running aren't calculating, logits. They're going off and calling an API call, but you're doing higher order work. So maybe you're doing the same type of prompt optimization. You might be doing another workbench in code, but it's right here, and you get a workbench that makes it really easy to experiment and see the results. So I've seen some tools, for example, that embed AI inside a spreadsheet. The problem you have when you do that is you first start out and you're like, I want to just perfect one row. Don't run it for all the pieces of data. And then you're in a spreadsheet environment. You're like, I really need to do just this little thing. And what you really want is something that lets you iterate till you get the prompt right. And then you're like, okay, now go run it on the 1,000 records I have. And that's kind of what I'm imagining that flow might look like for something like this as a prompt engineering tool. So I definitely envision a version of this where you're using it to make calls to an API for a model, rather than actually running it locally in your browser. And another flavor of this that I started prototyping is one that runs, as an example, runs as an extension. So it can go and open new
browser
tabs
extension.
Yeah, as a browser extension. So to open tabs, it will navigate to a page. It will click on things for you, and then you can pull the result into a table. You can look at it and then have another thing. And because it's got human in the loop, there's a couple advantages. One is that it's going to use your own credentials. So you can log in with your existing login. You can see what it's doing as it's doing it. You've got a, accelerator and a brake here, hitting play on every step it's doing. So you can walk through the processes it's going through. And it runs entirely locally. So you don't have to worry about, are you sending data to some organization? If it runs entirely locally, you might be okay. And then you could, just install it, be all set. So that's the other flavor of this that I'm working on. I talked about this. Actually, there's a video of me presenting at AI Tinkerers the second time, where I briefly alluded to trying to put it inside a browser for agentic workflows. And the last thing is why I want to make it web native is I can put videos. I can put actually a chatbot assistant here that you can talk to. And you can be like, okay, I don't understand what logits are doing here. And it can talk to you and tell you what's going on. And one interesting thing about making these are not actually sheets. These are really tables, is that spreadsheets and AI don't always work together. There's a paper called Spreadsheet LLM that talks through all the issues. And it's very easy when you give a spreadsheet a serialized, give an AI model the serialized version of a spreadsheet. It's very easy for it to get confused as to what it's looking at. And it's a lot easier with tables to just say, okay, everything has this data type. Here's what you're looking at. So that's the other avenue that I'm looking at right now. So I'll pause there since I've been talking for a while.
No, that's great. And we only got like 5 more minutes. So for people watching, all the links that we've been sharing and talking about are going to be in the video description. So you can check those out. And yeah, I mean, you already kind of talked about some of the next things that you're going to be working on, but is there anything else exciting in the pipeline that you want to talk about before we close it out?
I think we covered it. I'm really excited to do this thing that is used for kind of prompt engineering, and particularly in the browser. And then the other one is to actually have training, where you can actually train a model inside using this as a workbench. Those are I think for the audience, the 2 most interesting things that I do that might come out. I might do additional videos. I have one that I'm working on right now on counting flops, and specifically like the DeepSeek cost to train. So maybe look out for my YouTube channel for more of those.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's the things you're working on are the things that I was curious about. So that's super cool. And we'll love to have you back on in like a month or two, since get a better cadence going. Last time it was like 6 months ago we chatted, but you're working on very cool stuff, and I love talking with you about AI things because you're very plugged in. I wasn't even aware of, honestly, the R1 preview. I've kind of fallen out of listening to a lot of AI podcasts and stuff. I'm planning on creating an auto show enabled like AI summarization newsletter that just like takes in all these podcasts and writes summaries of them, just like for myself and also for other people. So hopefully that can kind of keep me in the loop a bit more. But at this point, you're more plugged in than me, so good job on that.
Okay, thank you. I will take that. It's hard to keep up, especially the last 4 weeks we've had. There's the operator release, there's deep research. I still haven't had a chance to really test drive that. So computer use, it keeps coming. So definitely a tool like that would be helpful.
All right. Good stuff, man. All right. We'll call it here. Thank you so much. And for anyone out there who wants to check you out, what's your socials?
I am on Twitter, IANAND, so is my username, at Anand. I am also on Blue Sky and LinkedIn. The best way to find me, though, is to go to my websites, which are spreadsheetsareallyouneed.ai. And then I have my personal website is ishananand.com, and I have some writings up there. That's where I had my predictions for 2025 as well.
All right, very cool. We'll call it there. We'll catch you guys next time.